I've actually been I've like publicly praised Agentics NZ and the work that Chris is doing on a couple of occasions, because what I'm here to talk about is not only, I guess, how I'm thinking about using AI for the kind of regulatory work that Hamish and I do. Hamish, my co-founder over there, who's actually done all the cool tech stuff, and I've just talked about it and worked out how to use it. So all the cool tech is Hamish. I'm thinking both about sort of how to use tech for regulatory purposes, but then also the bigger picture on like how do we regulate technology, and that includes AI and thinking about AI policy as well. I don't mean regulate in the sense of like ban or stop. I also mean encourage and build capability. And I've mentioned Agentics New Zealand because I think you're doing really cool work to actually build capability, link people up, find out what you can do, learn from mistakes, and even sort of hosting what you're doing with the sovereign machine is, I think, just a really cool case study that I've mentioned a few times to people in terms of like what it would look like to build AI sovereignty in New Zealand. So that's all a long way of saying thanks for having me. This is very cool. Really like what you're doing. It's also really fun to kind of nerd out on the kind of tech side of things because, as I mentioned, a lot of what we have to do is kind of talk about the tech to like law and policy people who kind of go cross-eyed and get bored as soon as you start talking about structured data, or like another one is like XML. Yeah. Yeah. Even CSV. I think people struggle with CSV as a thing, you know? Yeah, I always have to say spreadsheet. Otherwise they're not going to get it. So yeah, it's nice to be sort of talking about tech stuff. What I'm going to talk about tonight is a conceptual framework for thinking about how you create digital systems, including AI, that implement law and regulation in some way. That is kind of thought about as being this thing called rules as code. Who's heard of rules as code? Yeah, cool. Okay. It's interesting because it's like this global thing. The OECD is about to do its second massive report on rules as code. The kind of modern attention to it came out of work that Hamish and others were doing in Wellington in about 2018. But we've kind of all like forgotten about it, and it kind of got too hard. So we were chatting to somebody in Australia who was like, man, all this rules as code stuff you're doing, tell me more about what's going on in New Zealand. And like we just went and saw the place where the Service Innovation Lab used to be, and it hasn't existed for like 6 years or something. So yeah, I guess part of what we're trying to do with this is think about rules as code, how that fits into the world of AI. But then we're also trying to give everybody a bit of a conceptual framework for thinking about what you're doing when you're creating digital systems for working with law and regulation, and then how you kind of weave those worlds together in a way that makes the best of everything and doesn't do any creepy dystopian computer says no type stuff. So Hamish and I work together through a company called Syncopate, and Syncopate is kind of a consultancy, but then we also have a product called DocRef that I'm going to run you all through. And yeah, we are currently working with the Government Digital Delivery Agency and the Civil Aviation Authority, and looking to do lots more cool work. So what we're trying to focus on is how do we do little proofs of concept and prototypes of the kind that I'll kind of run you through today, with a view to like getting the public service, seeing the benefits of working in the way that we are, and then hopefully moving on to our DocRef managed service where we sort of publish law and regulation for them and build from there. So we came at this from the perspective of rules as code, and we kind of don't like that terminology because a lot of the time what you're doing is you're creating, you might be creating something that's not code. So it might be like a data set or a data structure, or one of the sort of projects that we worked on was creating like a data structure that sits behind an API for dealing with regulatory reporting information related to drinking water. So it's not really about code. The other thing is that law is not about rules either. So law is like this much more complex, kind of rich tapestry of stuff. It's not just about legislation that goes through Parliament. It's also about case law. It's about like guidance. It's about secondary legislation. It's about technical standards. Some of it's in New Zealand, some of it's overseas. So it's also way more complicated than rules. So talking about rules as code and how to turn rules into code is like a misdirection. It's not that interesting. It's not that relevant. What we're focused on is digital regulatory systems. So what that is it's a regulatory system that has a digital manifestation at the same time. So it's got a digital component and a legal component. And an example of this would be the work that's ongoing at the moment around the Customer Data Product Act. So all the open banking stuff that's being brought in. So there's like a statute, it's gone through Parliament. The whole purpose of it is to regulate data transfer between organizations, including to the extent that they're going to create regulations and then they're going to create an API. And all those things have to kind of line up. And then on top of that, there'll be a bunch of rules as code type stuff too. That sort of says like, in these circumstances, you give the information, in these circumstances, you don't. One of the things that people kind of concluded from all the rules as code stuff is if you start with legislation and you've never thought about how it's going to be implemented digitally, it sucks to work with because there's edge cases, there's exceptions, it's super vague. It's just not built for that. Like law is built as almost like a communication between people. And it's meant to have a bit of like flex in it and a bit of ambiguity and even stuff that looks what the lawyers call plain and ordinary. So the plain and ordinary meaning of something has to be cross-checked against its like purpose. So there'll be a purpose section that sort of says, this is what we're trying to do here. And you have to sort of cross-check it against the purpose of the thing.
Would it be closer to like ISO? And I'm not talking about 27,001 about the ISO standards up to even like as they did put out of the, in that way. So over here we use 8083 for messaging for like paymark and stuff. So, but that again is very simple. This is how you should do it. These are the rules around it, but there's a little bit there's not names.
It's a good example because like standards are almost like a mini like legislative exercise, and they're meant to be more technical, but essentially what you come up against is like the limits of what you can know in advance, right? So with code, it's like complete and coherent because you've planned everything. And basically if it doesn't go through the system, it doesn't go through the system. Whereas law has to deal with the real world and it has to be super open. So it actually needs to be quite flexible in the way that it's drafted. So you get this kind of gap between those two things. They're obviously letting people in. So the other thing to understand is that, as I've kind of talked about, like the actual text of the law is important. So like one of the things that happened when I observed some of the rules as code experiments that were happening is there'd be a bunch of people in a room like this with like a whiteboard and sticky notes or like a Miro board, and they'd be like putting stuff up and saying like, well, this is dog, this is cat, and there's a relationship between them, but there'd be no link back to the statute at all. So it'd be like you're building your understanding of how you think the law works, but if that's not linked at all back to the law, you're just, who knows what you're doing? Like, that's a nice picture, basically, because nobody can check it and nobody can go back to the source. So we kind of form this view that you can do rules as code, and we should do rules as code, because there's a lot of cool opportunities for automation. But when you're doing it, you need to understand that what you're doing is articulating how you understand the law and then embedding that in code. And you might be wrong. And you always need to be able to be wrong. And particularly if government is deploying it, you need to be able to go to court and have the court say, no, that's not what the law says. Because otherwise you're in a situation where you've basically got the king like directing automated systems at people. So you start to break down the separation between like Parliament and the courts that lets people say, hey, that's unlawful. Any questions on that so far? It's a big one. There's a lot of people going like, yeah. It's like Laws 101 in 15 seconds.
That's very subjective. Law needs to be very deterministic, right? This is
what happens, right, is it is slightly subjective, but we build up like a community method of kind of like making it a little bit less vague. So like words can't mean anything, right? Like words still mean something, and they can mean different things in different situations. But it's not just totally open slather, you know. Like there can be some situations where it's not that clear, but that's not always a bad thing, basically. And that's what courts do. That's what lawyers do. That's what courts do. That's what anybody involved with implementing law and legislation does. They build up a sense of like, here's how we understand this, and this is how this works, and this is why we think it's defensible.
Shall we?
Yeah.
And just let people come grab slice if they wish, and we can keep enjoying the talk.
Yep.
Come on, have yourself.
Everyone want to come in?
It's the puffy type of it's that someone ordered. That's okay. So we're gonna. There is the veggie one. That is the veggie one, I think. There's also a like a kind of a like a spicy margarita kind of one as well. It's chicken. Bring that over.
Sorry, everybody online.
Another pepperoni. This chicken. And this will be the margarita. Yep.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, the sponsors.
Thank you, Constable.
Should I just keep like podcasting in the background? Everybody can kind of listen.
Yeah, hit us. Keep going.
Okay. Yeah. So,
sorry, a follow-up on that actually.
Yeah.
So being subjective, doesn't it make it complicated rather than simplifying it? Like if it is deterministic, it's either true or false, right?
Yeah. I think there's so one of our other conclusions is that you couldn't turn all the law into code. You just can't. Like there's too much of it, and it's too ambiguous and vague and stuff. And it wouldn't even be that useful if you did. However, there are some areas where you can. So like we can think of examples in the customer product data law is a really good example, because it's got this like section in it that literally has if this then that else.
Yeah.
You know, it's like drafted for that kind of implementation.
That's deterministic then.
Yeah. And there's other stuff like, so the example I mentioned around the water API, you know, that's like publishing some regulation, but a lot of what the regulation says is like must not exceed like a value, a quantity, and a time frame. You know, so it's very like computational in the way that it's set up. And so there's no reason why you can't make that machine readable, machine executable. You just don't have to do everything. Yeah.
About those, have several clauses together wrap up a particular concept, and they have typically a couple of clauses which they handle special cases or exclusions and so on. That's another kind of a pattern. Yeah,
it is. What I'll say at this point is one of the other things that we found with our research was the interest in turning law into like code goes back to the 80s. So people have been thinking about it for ages. If you take that even further and you think of code as being logic, it goes back even further. It goes back to the 50s. So people taking law and trying to go like, well, what's the fundamental logic here? How do we represent that with like, you know, algebra is an old thing. So my answer is sort of to say there's lots of ways to do it, and it can be applied in lots of different contexts. And one of the things that we tried to do is really avoid getting into like what you can and can't do, and also we tried to avoid getting into, there's this whole area around like domain specific languages as well. So people trying to come up with programming languages that can do like all the law. And like the example that we gave there, right, with the drinking water stuff, the output of that was like a CSV file. So it was something that was machine readable, machine executable with the right code, but really had nothing to do with needing to use programming languages for it. You know, do you want to add any clarification?
Yeah, I was just going to.
This is all Hamish's idea, that bit. So yeah,
I was just going to jump in and say that with law addressing systems, you can often get a lot more formulaic and a lot more prescriptive. But us as people are just not that. And so take the term family. If you use the word family, it can be interpreted in many different ways in many different cultures. And so somebody drafting the law might use that term on purpose because of that ambiguity and the fact that we'll need to apply in multiple cultures and multiple contexts. And that is it's us. We're the messy bit, and I think that's good.
It's reminding me as well, like one of the other things when I sat in on some of the early experiments where, as someone with like a legal background, it was like watching a room full of people like rediscover Laws 101 and go, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? And that's basically all the skill that you get taught in like first year law. So there's like a really classic example of, there's like a law that says no vehicles in the park. And then you've got like a statue of a tank to commemorate World War II. And it's like inoperable. Does the law apply? You know? Because it's technically a vehicle in the park. So it's super interesting, super stimulating, but equally like there's an answer to that, you know?
Or smart block, it's inoperable.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so this is like first year law, you know? And actually that example of like family is a classic New Zealand case too, because it was like a social welfare statute, and it was about sort of adopted children, but it was a whāngai adoption, so it like didn't quite fit in terms of the way that it was framed. So yeah, jump in.
What that made me think about is obviously one of our key parts of our legislation is to treat your waitangi.
Yeah,
and that's living. So how do you? And it's as you go, it's becoming something that we should be going all the way through. So how do you make that?
Yeah. So our answer to that was because actually one of the main ways that the treaty has been given effect is through interpretation by judges. So they go like, it says this, but this is more consistent with the treaty, so we're going to go with this one. So that's actually been very powerful in the way that it's worked. The other one to think about there is like human rights. So again, quite vague, you know, like people think of human rights as being quite black and white, but they're really not, because you've always got to balance them, you know. So there's like a line that basically says where there's a way to interpret a law that's more consistent with fundamental human rights, you prefer that one. So again, you can see that like if we go, well, we're not going to do any interpretation, we're just going to publish law as code, you miss all of that. And that's why it's so threatening and dangerous, basically. But equally, there are some situations where you don't really want it to be unclear what you meant, you know. And we're thinking about this a little bit with the Civil Aviation Authority. So like autonomous aircraft, you want it to be like, yes, no like question, you know? So we're quite interested to explore this approach in particular regulatory context. And it comes back to that thing where it's like, you can't do all law, but you can pretty confidently do one in a particular domain. You can see also where that starts to bring in some of the agentic stuff too, because you've got essentially an agentic system sort of flying around, and it needs to understand the law and make decisions about it. So, yeah.
So are you doing, in the moment, obviously you talked about a lot of things that are in public domain right now, but you guys actually doing a lot of things that are not in public domain, and therefore are you using like a sovereign AI to do that as well? Or?
Well, no, I'm nodding because I'm like, yeah, this is exactly what we're thinking about. Yeah. So the other layer, see on my little diagram on the right, which you'll all be able to tell is broad design, right? Surely you can all pick it by now. The bottom layer there is like internal policy and then implementation code. Because so Jack Clark at Anthropic has this great phrase around paper plumbing. So he's like, most organizations are just plumbed with paper. And what we're kind of targeting is that. Like, so all of the internal operational and policy stuff is like a DocRef candidate for us. And the traceability that sits through all of that is also what we're thinking about. Because actually that's how like a Crown entity works. Like it starts with like a power and legislation, then it gets delegated to a chief executive, and the chief executive delegates it down to somebody else, and then it just filters all the way down. Yeah. Slide 2. So we have been trying to come up with a way of conceptualizing this. And what we came up with is this radical concept. And it's radical in the sense that like radical means sort of sick and, fundamentalist, right? But at the same time, it actually comes from the same root word as root. So like a root of a tree. So to give it a bit of a snappy title, we went with a radical approach to digital regulatory infrastructure. And what we mean by that is down the bottom, you have the roots. So the roots are basically legislation and regulation and all of that good paper plumbing stuff. And you're sort of building up, you're like layering up the root system. And through all of that, you have these pinpoint citations that I'll show you with the more tech side of the demo. And then, the top layer of that will be digital manifestations of all of that, whatever it is. So that's our framing of a radical full stack digital legal system. And we've put together a paper on this that's going to be published by the Cambridge Forum on AI, which is a peer-reviewed journal. So we're pretty excited about that and trying to tell the story about it. Because importantly, it really gives this conceptual foundation for what everybody's thinking about. And that can be quite important because otherwise you're kind of in a room with lots of different people with different backgrounds and nobody really, you're taking off little bits of it, but nobody can quite link it to the full whole. And we think that's really important to be able to do that. Where this starts to get interesting with AI stuff is like, that thing where somebody presents you with this like AI output and it's like, look at this amazing thing I made. And your first answer is like, that's cool. Does it work? Like, does it work how you think it does? Like, and you'll all be familiar with like how difficult it can be to kind of explain that it actually works. And it can look very good, but you don't, it's hard to understand what happened in the middle. And what we're if you think about that in a kind of legal regulatory context, that's hard. Like that's, you produce this like answer to a legal question, you show it to somebody and they're like, well, how do I know that's any good? And then you've got to explain that to like a lawyer or somebody and that's too hard. So like, it's a magic box. It's amazing. It does really cool things, but like only if you can prove its output is any good, right? And that's really hard when it comes to law and regulation.
Would you also, because you're going to be in law, would you also need to prove how to make that decision as well in the process? So it's not, the black box can't be a black box for what you need to do.
I think that's where like the stack comes into it. So it may be that the actual, let's say it's an automated decision-making system. It may be that the actual decision-making bit is just code. Like it may be you exceed this value, therefore no. Where there's an agentic layer to it, where it's like, I've reviewed all of the criteria and reached the conclusion that this is not justified. There's a really complicated thing in there where it's like, because if you think about it, what the large language model can do is it can give you reasons. It'll give you reasons till the cows come home. But are those actually the reasons that it relied on? And that's kind of like an emerging issue. But some of the other people say, well, humans are like that too. So like, yeah,
quite small, right? So,
yeah.
Sorry, I'm nerding out.
No, like yes, please. Yeah, no, and I think this is so we're thinking about these radical full stack digital legal systems, and I think the thing is, they're not going to be one statute through to one bit of code. They're going to be heaps of statutes, that whole paper plumbing layer across like multiple agencies. Then there's going to be like agentic bits, coded bits, logging, APIs, identity. And there's actually this paper that it's called the Agentic State. You should all be across it if you're not, because it's exciting. And yeah, out of Ukraine. Yeah, and they're thinking about that. And like from my perspective, what we'd be looking to do with that, because we're thinking about how do you design these things, how do you audit them, how do you maintain them, you're really trying to move as much of the system as possible towards deterministic bits that you can repeat. And then you might have like a little mini layer in the middle that is more kind of LLM stuff. And that's a very live thing, like with the agentic state thing in the Ukraine is gaining traction more. One other interesting thing to point out is there was a new paper in the last couple of weeks, and it's associated with this agentic state thing. But it's they're coining this phrase of sovereign legibility. And what they're looking at is they ran this test. So the theory is if most people are understanding the law and public services through chatbots now, to what extent can the chatbots actually access the information that they require to answer that question? And to what extent are they just pulling from like training data? Because what they'll do is just make up an answer. So what they did is they've coined the sovereign legibility thing. And what they did was they tested 160 countries using a range of different models. And they basically got the models to judge each other's output. And then they came up with this methodology for ranking the legibility of the information. And they made this point that like you might be wanting to move to this really agentic application bit where people are like applying for stuff through agents. But before you get there, you have to make sure they can actually access the information reliably. The reason that's great for what Hamish and I are doing is this bit. So models are still going to hallucinate. They're still going to cite wrong sources. But if you've got machine readable content with stable URLs, which is our whole thing, that raises the accessibility, improves search ranking and usability. And the important thing that they kind of say as well is like you can go with that now. Like you don't have to be a massively digitally enabled nation to have good websites and good website practice. So that's where a lot of our DocRef stuff comes in. Yeah.
Can we linger on that slide for just a moment?
Yeah.
How do you respond to the sense from, I'm sure, quite a few people, where actually we quite like humans and their fuzziness, making interpretations on law and running our governments, and we're not so on board with having agents run the government, which is this is sort of implying this model through an agentic state.
Yeah.
That's what I would say.
There was one really interesting piece that came through in some previous work that I did with the Digital Council of New Zealand, where actually some people really like the idea of not having a human doing it because they think the human is biased. And it was actually a real big thing in a kind of social welfare context. They were like, if you can give me the computer program instead of my WINS caseworker, I'll take it every single time, because of the perception of the WINS caseworker. And
from people dealing with WINS caseworkers, would that be?
Yeah.
But
equally, like, because I did a lot of work in the ACC space as well with case managers, and like they have just an impossible job.
Anyone who has to talk to WINS or ACC probably is unhappy. So, it's like talking. I used to work for a bank.
Yeah.
Anyone who calls a bank probably going to start swearing, right?
Yeah, but there is also that other thing where it's like, hey, no, I just want to come and talk to a person and I want to be able to speak my language, and like I don't want to have to like go through a phone tree to like fit my life into the options available. So there is both. Like, I think
that's true for the agent as well, right? Like, depending on the training data, they have biases as well.
Definitely, yeah. And I think like multimodal AI is going to be super interesting for this as well, because on the one hand, I'm very excited about the idea that you can have members of the public talking, having their concerns recorded, and then like translated into like Wellington bureaucrat speak in a way that it can be internalized. That's amazing, because there's a lot of people out there who know what's up, know what the deal is, but to kind of convert it into like formal email is beyond them for whatever reason. And so I think that's pretty cool. But again, that would raise different multimodal kind of risks too, like with different accents and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there might be some people like my brother who probably spent too many times rewatching Terminator 2, and the mental model of AI is, oh, could we do that? Well, just one step away from Skynet.
Yeah. And I feel that way too. Not necessarily in the like model sentience kind of way, but like my initial reaction to the rules as code work that Hamish was doing was like, that sounds terrible. It sounds like a dystopian hellscape, because like you can imagine applying for something and they're just like, oh, well, the computer program says no. And you're like, it's like that Little Britain sketch,
Whereas for me, it's that you're not going to get politicians making deals so that their brothers or sisters or family members can make money. That's what I see.
Yeah, and there's kind of an interesting thread as well where like developing economies which don't have a lot of the baggage that more advanced economies do can kind of leapfrog, and they do see a lot of benefit to this for like anti-corruption kind of purposes. So like I think Dubai has talked about that, and some of the African countries as well.
It's the hard reality that a relational connection can be a really positive thing, but it's also the same thing that corruption runs on. And so that's never going away either.
Yeah.
It's a tension that must be human.
I won't need to. I have to spend a lot of time on this slide with the words people rather than the tech people. But like what I'm communicating here, right, is you've got a Word doc on the left, you've got a PDF in the middle, and then you've got structured data on the right. And like at the moment, the whole government runs on Word docs. And they're just all over the place. They're not that well organized. And I said something about SharePoint today at the other audience, and like they laughed, and I couldn't tell whether it was like they're not on SharePoint and they wish they were, or like that SharePoint sucks, or like
it's still complete spaghetti, I'd say.
Yeah.
And people got on to SharePoint. So
Yeah, right. Okay. That's my vibe. Yeah, I get that vibe very strongly. And I'll show you some of the tech examples, but imagine if this was all markdown files and it was all saved in Git and also had DocRef structure to it as well, which I'll get to that, showing you that. The other thing is that if you're outside government, you can't even get the Word docs. You have to get the PDF. And I know from experience that's really annoying. Like, because especially there'll be a huge amount of like data in there. Like, think of a list of references. So the Human Rights Commission report that I did has like I think like 200 references in it, right? And even just being able to scrape that and reuse that for the next layer of research is super valuable. And of course I know how to do that, but most other people are just going to click and drag and get like a dog's breakfast out of it,
Terrible format for discoverability, right?
Yeah, and there like some people also go like, oh, well, you're just not using PDF, right? And well, it's like, well, nobody is, so like it's a problem. This came out in the last couple of weeks. So there is a company called Llama Index, and they specialize in like extraction from PDFs to Markdown and other formats. And so they've created their own benchmark. So presumably it favors their software, if you're going to look at it that way. And their best thing is 95%. And so like there are other competitors down here, like they've got Codex GPT 5.5 at 93, Opus 4.8 at 87.1. So then they've got some specialized document extraction APIs, so Reducto, Extend, and Data Lab. So that's 90%, 86%, 64%. And then they've got general purpose vision language models. So Qwen 3.6, Gemini 3.5 Flash. Those are the gray ones down the bottom. So that's like the specialist small ones. Like imagine building an agentic state on that at like best case 95% accuracy. That's like unacceptable. You just cannot do it. Nobody understands this in the legal policy world. They're just like, it's fine. Like anyway, so that's another argument in favor of a radical approach.
95% not being acceptable. Is that your opinion, or is that the government's opinion?
I don't know. I'd love to know. It would be like, which 5% are you missing? You know, like, and I think when it's like law, and there's going to be like a legally significant consequence, it's arguably, well, my argument would be you can avoid that entirely. Like, so why even create the risk? So one of the things that I kind of say is like, whenever an agency is deciding to publish in PDF, they're deciding to create risk downstream for somebody. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
Probability involved, is it ever 100%? Can it ever be 100% probabilistic?
Not if it's PDF.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'll get to showing you guys the tech as well, because I think it answers a lot of it.
Sorry, real quickly on the PDF thing.
Yeah.
Wouldn't PDF be like more valuable to give out, saying that this is the point in time information for us, which cannot be modified?
So PDF can be modified, and having it as a point in time also requires document management that a lot of agencies fail on. So you're totally right. And I'm not saying there should be no PDF. What I'm saying is we can have effectively what we have is a precursor layer. So you can still have your nice PDF, but that's not the authoritative version. You know, like when it comes down to like what is the do or die, this is the law and nothing else is the law. I think we can do better.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah. So
where I'm going is PDF are signed and hashes are implemented on it to maintain its integrity. There is a reason why people have invested so much into it.
Are they in your experience? Is that what you're saying, or you're like?
Are you talking more about the DocSign stuff where it's effectively like SSL? Like they create a hash.
Exactly. And that is to establish the trust on the document, right?
Yeah. I don't have any problem with that at all. It's a question of what tools for what use case. And one of the things that I don't have in this list, but is in our paper, is the integrity system. So you can still hash, a data set, and you can sign it in different ways and stuff. So again, I'm not saying totally throw out PDF. What I'm saying is that it's not a stable foundation layer for digital regulatory systems.
Can I intercept you with a real world situation? I spent about a year and a half developing a data sheet that mapped the drinking water quality assurance rules to the PDF. That was the official published PDF. We built a full documentation site, and at the very start of the site, it had a single link to the PDF, which was the authoritative source, and that's all we could do because it's just a PDF. And not long after that launch, they updated their rules. And the process that they followed was they logged into their CMS, they deleted the existing PDF, uploaded the new PDF with a new name. And so now the old version of the rules isn't there. There's a new version. My link's broken. And so that's more what is the practice around that as a file format. And that's, apart from the fact that you can't get into it, there's also that sense of this is a file and I'm just trading.
But the other wild thing is some of you may be working in government, but like if you go and ask them for the Word copy of the PDF that has been published, quite often people panic because they don't know where it is. Yeah.
The shared story. It's my experience. I used to deal with lots of financial contracts.
Yeah.
But income products, because the term sheet, those are also legal documents, right? And in the States, there's a legislation that the government needs to provide an API in XML format to have a machine readable formats of all those PDFs.
Right.
There's a legislation to make it happen.
Yeah. Right.
So maybe in New Zealand we are not there yet, but in some other high-tech states like the US, the tax that they actually push the government to make it happen.
Yeah.
So maybe a good reference for you to solve it.
Yeah. Thanks. The Federal Register in the US is one of them, and then the UK is pretty good on XML as well. But so we aren't super into XML, and
New Zealand rules in XML as well.
Yeah. Part of the reason is there's a lot in XML that has nothing to do with what the law is. So there's a lot of like metadata and elements and tags, and then if you're going to read it, it's like pretty hard to read. So you have to kind of reconstruct it from what you've got. And then you usually need some kind of software to go from the Word doc to the XML. And then people kind of use it quite inconsistently too. So Hamish has discovered all these problems with legislation in New Zealand and in the European Union actually, where people are using the XML inconsistently. Even though
he used AI at first.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah,
that's quite cool. Eh?
So you want just enough structure, but not too much.
Yeah.
Usable for humans.
Yeah, so we say like you need clean, well-structured text, and like for us, we have a Markdown-based conversion thing. So you can write in Markdown, and then you can export to HTML, JSON, CSV, and soon to XML and to DocX and to PDF if you want to. So you've got this really core, approachable, accessible, common format, and you can go out to whatever you want. So you can still get the PDF if you want it. But we could be in a situation where public servants are either using some kind of WYSIWYG for all the Markdown, or even just writing in Markdown. Like it's not that hard. Like I remember being overwhelmed by it initially, and now I'm into it. There's a lot of free Markdown tools too.
In part, you're also a DMS as well, document management system.
Yeah, sort of
control of that source to be able to like provide everything else. Because
we're I'll show you how it actually works. Because in part we kind of almost one level above that. Like we can just work with the data, Thanks for coming. One of the other things about this, in terms of the radical approach, is at the moment, if you want to do rules as code systems or like digital legal systems, it happens within government because only government has all of the information it needs. The other radical thing would be if you have all the law available as structured data and all of the documentation, it's versioned and you can access it in bulk, then other people outside of government can begin to develop these agentic systems. And so that starts to open up all this like civic tech stuff, all this government accountability stuff, which could be really exciting. And that's effectively what we've been able to do. We're sort of working with these structured data sets and then just, using agentic engineering to create prototypes and see what we can do. Let me get onto the actual tech because it's going to be more fun. And I can live demo it, I think, as well. There's a sovereign AI piece at the end, which I probably don't need to explain to you all, but let me jump in here. So this is legislation.docref.nz. It's got a light mode for paper people and a dark mode for data people. I'll leave it on dark mode to this audience, maybe. What we've got on here is a bunch of legislation. So Hamish has got a really sick parser that goes across the legislation website, pulls it all out, converts it to our format. He does like a visual pass over it, and then we publish it.
It's better than 95%, is it?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's no statistical layer. It's all programmatic. So there might be bugs in the code, but
there's bugs in the XML.
Oh, this is the XML, yeah.
Because we're going from XML to
XML.
Okay. No, XML to our input.
Yeah,
so
this is not a PDF.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me use XML as way cleaner.
So this is the Privacy Act. And if I click on there, the URL at the top changes. And what it has is a top level domain. So that'll be like the agency's site. It's got a name of the document. It's got a version number, and we've just gone with date-based versioning. It's got a language, and then it's got a unique identifier. And the unique identifier is because it's section 2, subsection 2. It's S2 subs 2. If I go like this and go versions, we've got all the different versions of it. So we can go back to the previous version, and we can do a diff side by side. Not much has changed. So we can go what's changed. and I'm going to show you this. It's going to be really ugly on purpose because it makes an interesting point. So this is running a diff on a block by block basis. So comparing the two things. What you can see here is a table. And if I just turn off the, go back to latest, and we go down to the privacy principles, what they've done is they've used a table for layout on the page. So when you're looking at it with your eyes on the PCO website, it looks nice. But when it's data, it's garbage. So this is where you kind of get into the like needing to have a format that lines up the whole way through, because you can imagine pointing an agent at that and it's got to go like, what the fuck's going on here? Yep. So this is where the kind of full stack approach becomes important. Hamish has done all kinds of magnificent things with the code such that we can point to like a numbered item in a table cell and like a, a table that doesn't work. But being able to avoid these things would be quite nice, and it would make everything look a lot better, and it would make our diff work better because it's all done on a block by block basis. And you wouldn't wind up with like a table cell that just has an I, which is Roman 1, which is kind of funny too. Like we're still numbering things with like Roman numerals, which just seems stupid in a computer age.
It's true.
Yeah, there's Roman numerals in the AI Act, which is just like, why? What? Like, surely.
Lawyers love this stuff.
Yeah, lawyers do. They love it.
There's
love
it. Case in the civil aviation rules of Roman numeral 1, 2, 3, but 2 has ABC, so they've done IIA, IIB, and IIC, and of course everyone knows that IIC in Roman numerals is actually 98. So trying to get something to a computer to pass that one.
It's painful.
That's a mess, eh? So like, and the other thing is like legislation, PCO, the Parliamentary Council Office, like they're probably the best in government at publishing and structured data, and that's like their whole job. Their whole job is managing legislation data, and that's where they're at. And I don't want to like be unfair to them, but the point I'm making is that like even once you nail one agency, you've still got every other agency, and then you've got international jurisdictions, and then you've got non-governmental bodies who are all publishing stuff in different ways. So part of what we're doing is offering like a common middle layer as well. So it'd be great if everybody published on DocRef from the start, but if they're not going to, then we can deal with that. One other feature I'll show you is we have an annotation tool. So the idea here is you make a comment, see the author, and you're making a block by block like annotation on the thing, and then you can filter by your tags. So the reason this is exciting for me is if you're doing that rules as code stuff, you're recording your take on the act right next to the data point that you want to record it against, and that becomes a reusable asset as well. Another really interesting use of this was when we were working on the API standard. So Hamish and I drafted the government API standard, which is now in the queue for sign-off, using this approach and using DocRef datasets and using annotation sets. And what you wind up being able to do is, if I go up here, we've got export documents. So this is where the CSV and JSON files live, and we have chunked and unchunked versions. We'll be adding some other functionality soon. What you can do is wind up working in a repository that is like that. So you can be working with all the data sets and working with all of the documents as data, and you can choose which platform you want to work in too. So like I'm working in Obsidian because it's cool and useful and has minimum functionality for what I want. But you can imagine a situation where what you do is you go and pull a whole bunch of law and regulation that you're going to need to work with. You've got subject matter experts, or you've got others, or maybe you've got AI going through and annotating it so that you've got all the contextual information about it. It's all cross-linked to each other, and you're working with it in a versioned repository. And then you're running agents over that and either writing new documents or writing specs or writing code to implement the law. The critical thing about this whole URL thing as well is the idea is that that can sit in your code base. So if you're saying, hey, this API is designed like this because of this, you're putting that actually in your code. And then you can go and trace back to it. And you can see whether it's out of date as well, because you've got the version in there. The thing that drives the versioning is a programmatic changelog as well. So you can feed that into downstream systems and understand what you could go and update.
What we mean by that is it's not a diff that's like playing VS Code and just generate on the fly an algorithm. It's a published data set of the version. And so you can then just take that data set and apply it to your code base to find what you need to update, or your agent with that. And perhaps the other thing to note is URLs, you can then request the agent who's perhaps like scanning that document to give you an answer to include those references in the answer. And so that way you end up with essentially more of a glorified search result. It's you can read it like the AI response, but it's full of links, and you can click the links to go and check, which is awesome, to make sure. So the validation time's cut.
So this means that you can, a couple of months later, and you give it either agents or logic shows that checks periodically that everything is not out of date, updates the links or alert you to the situation, which of course you can't do it now.
Yeah, so with the rules of code work that I was doing that inspired this, the actual act of modeling the law, interpreting the law in code is really a lot of work. You don't want to repeat that. And so you want visually those tags to go through, but then the law just changes, or whatever document changes, and that impacts on it. And so that's why the change logs are really needed, because you want to be able to go, I want an automated way. Tell me where I need to
immediately.
Yeah.
So this is extremely useful for everybody who ever works in any organization. Just mentioned bloody SharePoint, lack of versioning, different versioning. That you are. I spent 2 or 3 days last week trying desperately to work in anyways, right?
Yeah.
Read that stuff, right?
Yeah.
And all that stuff. To have a practical use to reference 3 or 4 monstrous PDF documents, right? Different sections, different versions, but I discovered and all stuff to tell us how to apply such in practical terms. Yes, we have things we do. We want to say, yes, this is how we implement this parts of legislation. And it never occurred to me to have exactly what you're saying here, the version and all the stuff. And later when it breaks, you can discover that it's broken and you can update it and so on. This will be extremely useful for not just for what you're doing, but internally, just a sort of Microsoft mess to have a meta layer of connectivity.
Yeah.
We learned the hard way with that in the old PCO site. They always published the current law under the latest thing, and you would copy that in your code. And from then on, you never knew what version it was coded from. It was completely useless.
What was the civil aviation one with all the pictures? 91?
67. And the 67
So this is not public yet. This is the civil aviation rules on DocRef. So we can make it look like any agency's website. But that's like a pinpoint link to a, Roman numeral kind of thing. We can apply the versioning thing on top. You can download it as a CSV file or a JSON. We'll have the annotation tool working in there. And this is the API. So each one of those links to a pinpoint thing is like an API endpoint that you can point at to go and pull specific data out. So the other thing is like you've got all the data sets as the digital regulatory foundation, but equally you could be building in live things to the actual regulatory text as well. So we're really taking the moving away from paper-based documents to like data sets that you're treating as infrastructure just to the next step.
Okay,
legislation.
care is all paper-based. They are lovely things.
Okay.
Are you saving this as flat files in a Git repo or in a structured database?
It's all text file.
It's all file based.
We need to build for like a 50-year archival type of time frame, which PDF doesn't fill. We don't know if that fits. And so, but a text file is probably the safest bet. Will be our open text files. And so
is it markdown or?
So there's a markdown format that we use to generate some of the documents ourselves. We've extended markdown and called it struct down. So it's basically focused on a structured document. It's quite a different beat in terms of what the goal is with markdown, but a markdown document is a struct down document. And then the struct down document is converted into a flat data set that could fit into a single Excel spreadsheet or a single database table. It's an array of values, and then we use that with a publishing library, whatever format we're trying to publish with, to compose the document in the format that people want to use. And so that means that you can easily use like Git and diff changes and tools that we're familiar with to track if anything has changed in the documents, between different. Well, I do that all the time when I'm working on the code base. It's like all the documents is the world's biggest test engine now. It's like, I can see if this is having an impact.
But on the back end, it's just like a bubble structure that we can browse.
The static sites.
Yeah.
So the magic is in the production of that static site.
Yeah.
But we're just dealing with text files.
That's great. That's great. Again, all sort of from an archival standpoint.
Yes.
Let's just chew through it.
Yeah.
Have you downloaded it, right?
Yeah.
I guess so. Yeah, we just need to
Just think how you test it at scale. Just download it.
Yeah. We would love to find a thing to test it on at scale. Yeah. So one of the things that
There are about 400 million data points on that legislation site, so that's the biggest site. So.
Yeah, true.
um
Then what? 3,000 different people put their own styles on every single one as well.
So one of my sort of I've had a couple of bulk tests, but they're actually all from like PDFs. They're not from good quality source data. One of the things I wanted to do was so in my sort of policy work, I track all the different documents that relate to like AI use and governance. And so I basically went and scraped them all, pulled them back, converted them to Markdown, and then ran them through our thing. Then took that, wrapped it up in an MCP server and used it to deliver the Human Rights Commission stuff. So imagine if when you're doing sort of policy work or you're assessing compliance with AI systems, rather than it being like, hey, go find the PDF or like go find the law or whatever. Instead, there was like a repository. It was already pulled together. It was versioned and up to date. You could download it as structured data. You could work with it all via a sort of semantic graph rag system is what we wound up doing. And then you're away. You're just like using it to assess your system's compliance. And you might even write your compliance documentation too, drawing on it. So pretty excited about that one.
The CSV files that you can download is basically the text from that block and the link that is the unique reference. So you can just bulk download those, throw them in an agent, and the agent can still give you a URL as its identifier, so you can still go and validate the source.
One question: how do you maintain the integrity of this document? Like, if you have to trust this document, how do you maintain the integrity of it?
What we're going to be doing is setting up what we call a document governance framework. And a big part of that is we're going to have like an indicator on the document that lets you know whether it's safe to build on it or not. And then also it's about saying we're not going to change the metadata. So you can customize the IDs. And you can imagine if you go, we're going to call it part instead of rule, you break all your IDs. So we really need upstream publishers to understand the consequences of what they're doing. So we're setting up agencies with a document governance framework that we need them to understand. And it's also like, you can't go and just correct a typo without telling anybody, particularly when you've got the ability to version, So another big thing is the PCO has the secondary legislation access standards. And essentially there's like a lot of secondary legislation in New Zealand that you can't access. And they're saying not only do you have to publish it, but you've got to publish it in HTML, and you've got to make sure you're keeping all the old versions online. So there's a big effort underway across the public service to do that.
What is secondary legislation?
It's like regulations. So it's like you might have an act that says you can make more regulations.
Oh,
So it's like the delegated level. Yeah. Yeah. It's
they're not published.
some of them aren't, yeah.
Jeez.
Some of them
Yeah.
you have to pay for, which is
Yeah. So this is our editor as well, just last bit of the tech demo. So you can see it's just Markdown on the left and it's a DocRef thing on the right. And, you know, that's a table with pinpoint links to table cells. And that's a code example, which is pretty cool. So you could actually be like, I'm really interested in this for technical documentation and specs. So what we'd love to work out how to do, you can imagine running a full agentic engineering project built on this. So instead of all your stuff being in Markdown, it's actually all in DocRef datasets. So when your agent is saying, I've implemented line blah in the Markdown document, instead of that, it could be saying, I've implemented this, and here's the pinpoint version URL. And I've played around with that internally, but it's something that I think is like pretty enormous in terms of.
just FYI, the editor on the left is the Monaco editor, which is the open source web version of VS Code. That's probably the short to describe it. So you also get multi-cursor support in your legislation writing it.
Which for the public service, like they haven't dreamed of multi-cursor editing. You know, like when Hamish first told me about it, I was like, what? You know, because a whole bunch of people are just, they haven't learned all the text management tools that you all know, you know?
Yeah, when I first, sorry.
Control D, Control Shift L.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Chris.
Changes all
So
the-
see what I've done with
all the way through.
Yeah.
How many heads you have to say that?
Sorry.
How many heads you have to follow that?
How many?
Making a joke. How many heads you need to follow
Yeah.
that? What?
Yeah.
What?
What's going? Hey, and so you could make changes.
So let's say I want to add like another row.
How?
I know. It's pretty cool.
Yes.
Yeah. So this is just VS Code, right? But
Years
yeah.
ago, and
Yeah.
I totally love it.
Yeah,
You-
Life changes.
What's the
Life changing.
line, right?
just open the like developer thing and it helps you find it. I'm on Mac, so I don't know what it
So
is.
Windows on VS Code is Windows Alt L or Shift Control colon, one of those.
This is very different from my earlier presentation.
Editor you've been doing, how would you- that's a kind of grounds up example. How would you put that layer on top of the existing PDF?
What we'd love to get to is nobody ever does PDF. but what it would be at this point is as a Word doc. So you've got a Word doc to Markdown is like pretty easy. And then you basically put the Markdown in there. But
Condemned with perfect PDF.
then what we wind up doing is using the best converter that we can and running multiple different things and cross-checking them and then doing a final visual check, basically. Because there's other...
At some point, the organization.
Yeah.
Yes, this is it.
And what's kind of wild is that like on a lot of agency websites where they publish their rules as HTML, they say these are not authoritative, so don't rely on them. They basically just disclaim any risk around that, which is not good.
What do you need government to do centrally to make sure that this becomes the standard? And what are the skills that public servants are going to need in order to be able to do this? And to move away.
We're trying to work that out.
With the word of co-pilot?
Yeah. I don't know. We're trying to wrap our heads around that. Like we can come up with a thing for how to do it, but there's kind of multiple ways in. So the rules site that I showed you for the Civil Aviation Authority, right? Hamish has built like a Word document pipeline. So we just go straight from Word document to website. And we don't use any AI in it. That doesn't fix any issues with the Word docs, which there are many. But we can do that. So if to the extent that there's stuff where we have the Word docs, we could just do it, and we could just start publishing digital regulatory infrastructure for every agency. The feature we haven't shown you is the cross-site publishing as well. So what we can do is put two links together, and basically, let's say you've got MB here, and then you've got DIA here. You can show the DIA document on the MB site without actually republishing it. So you can have cross-site collections.
Do they have to update their CS?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Content security policy.
Yeah. But in terms of siloing government information, and then thinking about the API bit, and then think about the search that you can build on top of that, like you could be searching across all government information from authoritative sources at once, rather than the like cupboard of Narnia that is like digital.gov, you know, you just like turn another corner and you're like, oh, look, a new thing I've never seen.
I didn't think that was possible, actually, but good luck with it.
Yes, it is.
But there's a couple of things with that. One is that they feel this pain of the downstream impacts of their own publishing environment. The other thing that was surprising to me is they hate to publish the HTML in its current form because they do the word to HTML and it's painful. And so there's a two-pronged thing. So I think we're having success with the people who are already looking downstream and going, how do we solve that? But actually, I think it might be the publishing that solves the problem.
Yeah, it's looking at the human-centered, like, why do we want it? Why do companies need it? So Brian Roche's thing of, you don't want to know that you're dealing with MB or MSD or DIA or any of those things. You want your one digital identity and you want to be able to just interact seamlessly as the customer.
Yeah.
For the people who are working inside, it's just a mess, all of us. We wouldn't be anywhere near it. But it needs somebody to set the kind of standard and the expectation. And there's a lot of work going on that's about to go with government. When the new government comes in, regardless of who they are going to get a briefing from the group that's working on it. And this sort of stuff should be in it. That sort of thinking, because if they don't put this thinking into what their operating models are, to what the skill sets are that they need for people, and all of that, it's going to continue. We're going to be dealing with PDFs in 30, 40 years' time.
Is this GDDA you're thinking of?
Well, GDDA's had a big review of it, and nobody knows what's happening.
Yeah, because
you're probably closer to them.
Well, they're our current customer. So, but like the finding I think what we need to do is communicate the value, demonstrate it widely, have people that are not us saying this is a good idea, and then find our way into getting that. Because again, the other thing for us is like we're thinking about this quite from a public interest angle, even though we've taken a product-based approach. And the thing is like the potential size of this thing is like enormous in terms of people reusing the data, you know? So it's not about us like owning the whole space or anything.
It has to be about one standard.
Yeah.
But somebody needs to make a decision.
Yes. If you know anybody, we're refining our pitch.
That's actually my question about like at some point when you reach critical mass, and you know, say everyone in the world was using this, just for instance, going upscale.
Yeah.
The way that you built that, you need a single focal point and it constantly changing, you won't be able to use like a CDM because the content will need to come fresh, which means you pull it straight off disk. So the IO on the disk and through the motherboard and the SAN or wherever it's hosted is actually going to be quite intense from the IO point of view.
There's not one site, there's like
there's not one system.
Millions of Microsoft.
Oh, okay, cool.
Hosted wherever.
Okay, cool. I wasn't sure if you like had a single like.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
I think it'd also be interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like expensive than being me.
Yeah.
I don't want anyone finding that legislation side yet, because it's not making money, it's just us stupidly using it.
But I guess part of it is if you see the value in this and you're doing a whole bunch of agentic testing, like we'll help you pick up a data set and do a proof of concept, because again, what we need to be able to show in decision makers is like return on investment, reusability, all of that stuff, and they don't understand anything I've just told you really. So showing what's possible with it is actually the most powerful thing, I think.
Big argument, a big winner for them is having people who consume the rules coming to them and asking, hey, can we have?
Yeah.
Because we need to improve our regulatory reporting to you.
You had a, sorry, we just had a.
Questions, actually suggestion on positive one, maybe not, which one first?
Go for it. And also like critical, skeptical feedback is very valuable for us. So.
Legal policy some love PDFs because they have it maybe outdated belief that is inscrutable as the old parchment, with wax seal, which all know that's not the case, right? So good luck trying to persuade it to something which was open and you can read it and change it and so on.
Yeah.
That's like that's one of the major mental obstacles everywhere, not only God, everywhere go with that. The other thing I see that this got so many different applications, and I'm trying to point out to you, this is for me the most useful case is to simply look like a extremely sophisticated search and index engine to internal documents and all the stuff. If I'm an operations manager who knows I'm paying millions of dollars for storage of files from 3 different places, plus email, right? I would invest $100,000 to search and you delete this thing because that's like business case writing itself. Plus, as you're saying, indexing can be one index also true internally. And all the stuff. If I'm Microsoft, I'll be pitching this to Microsoft because they don't have anything like it. If you think about it, they made this mess with OneDrive and SharePoint, and they know how to untangle that.
So this is what I'd ask. Have you worked with Vanta at all? Because they do a lot of the.
There are because we have to.
You have to be.
We've got an application in with the marketplace, so yeah, we are. But I mean, they're really interesting, right? Because they haven't gone this far with all their documents. Like it's still.
Who's that? Who's that?
Yeah.
It's like a compliance platform for like technical standards.
ISO 27001,
Yeah.
privacy, security. Yeah, they've got like 20 different standards, and they just keep charging $5,000 to $7,000 extra per standard per year. So yeah, just so you can run it, and then you have to do your auditors separately.
But they map all the like controls, and then they plug into your APIs so they can monitor your compliance and stuff as well. So there's quite a bit in there for us as like 2 people that don't want to think about where we're saving our policies and stuff. But I mean, what we're also doing is increasingly going to kind of almost treat ourselves as like an agentic infrastructure. So we're going to have all of our policies and stuff on an internal DocRef site, and we're going to manage it all that way. So. Okay, sick. Yeah, so look, thank you. We're pretty excited about all of this. We just need to put it to use. And at the moment, we're still in that phase where we're kind of doing business development and building up product, and then, trying to grow awareness and sort of chasing our tails quite a bit. But there's stuff there that's ready to just go for people that get it,
Like, are you looking to change the world and how we do stuff, or are you looking to make a shit ton of money and then change the world? Because like you've got a very cool product, but the reality is like, are you here? Do you need to make money to be able to change the world first, which changes how your BDM business goes, right? So.
So I would say it would be a focus on developing a sustainable service, given our archival nature of trying to put forward. We would like to get to the point where the entire stack is open source as well, but we want to take that step with the ability to govern it properly and to ensure it's actually deployed properly. Otherwise, we'll end up at SharePoint. It's like 2.0 or something like that. So there's a series of steps there that we have to go through, but the main one is to, and this is true when government wants to deal with you, is how sustainable are you? So that you have to charge them enough to make them believe that you're sustainable.
So for this question slightly different way. Sorry, I went to business school. So if you're in Silicon Valley and teaching this, you will have a very different audience, pushing and you will not be able to defend yourself from money pouring in your direction. Seriously.
Sick. Good. No. So that's really good to hear. in terms of you're getting at, I think we need to make money. One of the reasons we haven't done this on an open source basis is because it has to be sustainable and we have to steward it. And we do recognize that like Microsoft in a second would just go, and now we output to DocRef. Now we output to DocRef and don't worry about it, you know, and that would suck for us because we've put a lot into this and there's a lot of thinking and it's a pretty niche thing, but we pulled it all together. So it is like a business, want to make a lot of money. A big part of what we aspire to do though is like do better in terms of building the systems that exist. And then also that kind of radical piece where it's like you're kind of putting tools in people's hands that they never had them before, and being able to kind of support that as well would be quite cool. I mean, access to justice.
Parts of this?
What's that?
Have you patented any parts of this?
Painted?
Yeah.
Patent.
Yeah, no, sorry. We've got some trademarks. We haven't patented though. Yeah, trademarks and it's all obviously closed source, but
So
yeah.
the reason why people do that to get the investors, because yes, they bring lots of money, they bring lawyers, patent law and everything else. Because if I have a team of developers and I listen to this and you recorded this when I publish it, I'll be going there saying nobody goes home tonight. I want this by morning.
Maybe don't publish it then. I mean, we have done a lot of demos of this, so it is all out there. We're kind of just saying this is what we're doing. It's pretty hard too, I guess.
And so civil aviation are a customer.
Yeah, at a proof of concept phase. So what we are doing next week is trying to persuade them to go further.
Actually.
Yeah.
Can I suggest two things? One thing is, I think we probably need some sort of authorities to back up these. For example, Archive New Zealand, they're dealing with all these public records of data. I think these things will be helpful for them to test out how to deal with the old stuff. Or whatever, any format, right? That will be a good start. And
That's a good point. Yeah.
Lots of data and the documentations you can work on with.
Lots of PDFs.
That's a start point. That will be very easy to get to. Then go into random organizations. They have a good system. They won't accept it. Yeah, you need to find someone.
Do you know
Mark?
Use him digital archives library. I can introduce you.
That'd be great. Like the other thing that we find is bits and pieces of government are all very aware of what we're doing, and we do get really positive feedback, including up to just below sort of DCE level. It's getting people to take the plunge to actually do something. It's hard.
And the second thing is because I'm thinking doing the same thing way ages ago when we first had a comparative information. The biggest problem we're having is like the compiler can't handle the non-documentation. So that's why I come with the idea the Markdown is a perfect fit for that. But I mean, do you want to expand your technical scope, not only focus on the regulation scope to the normal organizational stuff? Just a little bit for the audience.
We do. And then the way that I dealt with that long context issue with the API standard was basically took these data sets, put them into a graph database with the structure, and then could do like graph rag searches. So you go and retrieve all the stuff, chunk it, and then write from that. So hopefully we can solve that long context problem too.
It's really cool what you've built.
Thanks.
But I was just wondering, have you found about RAG databases and stuff?
Yeah, so that's where we've got the chunking in there. And then, but also we're kind of focused on, agencies might have their own approach to how they do RAG. So we can kind of offer the data, or we can, begin to build out the MCP layer, basically. Yeah.
Unified data layer.
7. Okay. I need to go to the airport. Yeah.
Are you not based in Wellington?
No, Auckland, but Hamish is in Wellington.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think what you've done here, it's really kind of foundational.
Hamish.
What you guys have built here, it's digital foundations for how we do government in the future. Like I see it as essential.
And beyond government too,
It's essential. So
Thank you.
I hope you find more people that get it and that we can just sort of roll it out as a standard.
Yeah, thanks, Chris.
Cool.
Appreciate it. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
And thanks online as well.
Thanks everyone online. We'll wrap up the call. Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you. Bye bye.
I better.